want to share a little bit with you about the journey that I've been on, I think for the last 17 years. But I'm going to try to do this not in 17 years long, but in 2 or 3 minutes. And here's the story. I started working with senior women almost accidentally, but the presenting question at the time was really, why are we getting up the curve and then out too quickly? So people were asking, why can't we get her into a senior position? She's here 18, 24 months, and then she's gone. And that spawned a piece of research that became this book, Reaching the Top. And in that one, there were 5 really key conclusions, talking to 100 women, both in Europe and in the US, about what was happening in their careers. And here's the 5 factors. Now, that sense of isolation, I'm alone, the network is deep, but it's not broad enough. I don't have the kind of feedback or the mentors or the sponsors that I need early enough to really make a difference. There's a lack of credibility in the organization's eyes, not in her ability, but in what the organization thinks she can do. And this whole issue of finding a challenge of finding your way to say what you want to say in your own authentic voice. Now, I'm happy to say, after all the work since this time, I'm pretty clear that we can solve the sense of isolation, because we've done that for a variety of clients, and it happens to do with bringing women together and getting them knitted together, so it's not just isolating, and then from that base to reach out to their male colleagues. We know how to help women broaden the network. We have mechanisms for getting them better feedbacks and sponsors and mentoring, and I think we're genuinely making progress on helping women understand how to find their own voice, their own sense of executive presence, and everything that goes with it. So I feel pretty good about all of those. The one that has troubled me is this lack of credibility, right? And I'm gonna say, even though we started this work 15, 17 years ago, I don't think much has changed. I still think those are the same factors that are affecting women, that are making it harder for them to advance and stay and stick. But I want to focus for a minute on this lack of credibility that troubled me for a really long time. Here's the deal. It is the source for this new book, You Can't Know It All. Because what I was finding is that expertise trumps everything, that women are much more comfortable staying to the thing that they know how to do. They know the content. It gives them a sense of confidence, and it gives them a seat at the table. And that expertise is what they lean on, and they do more and more and more of the expertise rather than giving the breadth. And it's the breadth that makes them credible at the senior most levels in the organization's eyes. And it is also the breadth that helps them broaden their network beyond just the deep context that they already have. So this new book is really about developing this credibility. As it turns out, I started that journey in looking at women, but it turns out that men are suffering with it as much as anybody. And I will have to tell you, I see way too many CEOs, particularly in the professional services firms, who are still leaning on their expertise. They still dabble into the details of how to make things happen in the organization, when in truth, what they should be doing is a lot more enabling than we're seeing them currently. So I think this whole expertise is a big issue for everyone, but particularly for women. A couple of other conclusions there is at the senior levels, you have to have greater breadth, because that's what gives you credibility. You're weighing in on a lot of different issues outside your expertise. And it's not about giving up the expertise, as many of our business schools would like to say. It's not about becoming a general manager, but it's about learning how to balance those two. So I know when to call on the expertise, and I have the skills to call on something other than the expertise. And fundamentally, it's about how do we get out of the comfort zone. All of us, but women in particular. So that's the basis for the work that has led to the senior levels. But what has started happening since then is, well, have we made progress? And the answer is yes, we have. We have more women on boards in lots of places. There's all sorts of good data to show that. I think that's a good sign. And clearly we can make progress. We put our mind to it. And we're really doing a lot better job at recruiting younger women into the organization. Most of my clients are getting about 50% into the entry levels. That's a good sign. The not so good news, though, is we still don't have enough senior women, or CEOs for that matter. Those numbers are fluctuating way too much in the last 10 years. And we're struggling to keep the pipeline full. So when I talk to most of my clients, their biggest concern at the moment is this younger women in the mid-rank level, sort of in that 28, 32, 33 range, where they've developed expertise, they've got some credibility, they've got a good track record, we know they're top performers, and we can't keep enough of them in the organization and progressing. And so what we've been doing in the last couple of years is focusing on that pipeline. What do we need to do for that pipeline to keep them moving through, growing, and progressing? In the context of what we know what makes senior women effective as well. So here's what we have been told about younger women. I talk to lots of senior women who say, I wish I had known this in my 20s and I would be so much further along. So what we need to do is to go and tell younger women all of these messages that the senior women now know is relevant for their careers. And we've tried that, but it doesn't necessarily work. And the reason it doesn't work is because we haven't paused to ask, what is it that younger women are really concerned about? So I'd like you to think for a moment, and I'm going to pop up a polling question in just a minute. For the young women in your organization, so think late 20s into 30s, mid 30s especially, which one of these is most troubling for her? Finding a mentor, getting pay equity, the culture, getting feedback, the bias, the next steps in career, or the promotion? So let me open this poll question, and I'd like to hear your answers. What do you think in your organization is really troubling women in their 20s and 30s, late 20s and 30s? All right, so the winner out of this one is identifying next steps in a career. And interestingly, that is what we're seeing, is that the biggest anxiety is what's next. And if you go back to this whole notion of expertise, what's happening for women at that stage is they've developed their expertise, they developed their credibility, and now they're sort of looking up at very lean layers between them and the boss's boss and saying, I don't want to have my boss's job. Usually because the boss is a broader expert in a bigger area than she is, and it just doesn't look like an interesting job. And there is no clue about where else to go and no one to talk to. You can go to your boss, even with a good relationship, and say, I don't know what's next. And typically the boss will say, good, me neither. So there's just not a lot of sense in how to begin to think about my career. And keep in mind, for these women, they are high performers. So at every stage in their career, they have always been at the top of the class. Top grades, top summer interns, top job, fast promotions, early promotions, top ranking. And we hit that mid-levels there, and suddenly they're in a pack, a very good pack, mind you, and they're starting to ask, what happens next? I've put in all this effort and I'm lost. I don't know what to do. And it's that piece that we're finding is most troubling. So if they ask that question of, I don't know what's next, and then they start to look, in my view, at the rest of these factors and start to say, I can't survive around here. Let me go somewhere else. And that's where the bleed begins. Now, the temptation is to say, well, it's the managers that need to be doing a better job of this one. And I'm going to err on the side of saying the managers have enough on their plate. They can't do anything else. So I'm cautious about this one. So let me stop the poll and let me show you what it is that I think is really happening for younger women. Here's what I'm hearing from them. So the number one is, I'm not getting promoted rapidly, and I've always been ahead of everybody else, and I can't see what's ahead. And she's being told things like slow down, or you have to wait your turn, or a host of other factors. And she's afraid, if you look at the headline news, that she will wait too long and the opportunities will pass her by. And if you read what's in the headline and you read what we're saying to people in the panelist summary, and you got to go out and demand, you got to ask for, that's what she's thinking she needs to do. The third thing is, she doesn't know where she's going. She's not learning as much. The next step is her boss's job. And she doesn't see the need for lateral moves. Those don't make sense to her, nor is it clear to her how you would go about making those lateral moves. And finally, she's not at all sure who she should trust. She may have had a great relationship with her manager or even with a sponsor somewhere along the line, but she starts to question whether or not she can trust that person at this point in time. It's just, are they telling me what they're supposed to be telling me because that's what the party line is, or are they really there to help me? And once that cocktail all gets going, it's a pretty deadly mix. And the headhunter call and the I'm wanted somewhere else and somebody else is courting me starts to look like a great thing. And in addition, if she has any sort of behavioral pieces in there that are not kind of polished enough, she starts to get very ambiguous feedback that doesn't make a lot of sense, like executive presence, invisibility, and that just is sort of the icing on the cake that kills it. So, and our last piece I'm going to say is what we're hearing back from the younger women really routinely is that they are tired of hearing the classic advice on the panels and from all the people who give them advice about how to manage their career. Telling me to build a network is, yes, but I don't know who or how, and I certainly don't have time for it because I'm working insanely hard. And everybody tells me to find a mentor, but I don't know where to get started. Have no clue, and I don't know why anybody would want to mentor me, by the way, because they're all really busy as well. And then you tell me this thing about raise my visibility, and I don't even know what that means, let alone what I need to do about it. So the frustration is really high. The telling them they need to do those things, which they do, it's true, they need a stronger network, they need mentors, they need visibility, they need executive presence, they need a whole bunch of things. All of those are true. But telling them to do it isn't solving the problem. And so what we need to do is to find a way to help them solve that problem before they make that mistake in their real life. So perfect segue. So let me show you how I think we need to help them. So the skills that she needs are less in the IQ space and more in the spanning space. It's not about becoming more of a technical expert. It's more about developing what some would call EQ, but I think it's broader than EQ. And the second thing is not giving her that standard advice, but giving her that experience of why that advice works and how she needs to think about going about doing it. And often she doesn't know she needs those things until it's too late. And then we've got the reputational damage, exactly as you said. So our solution on this one is to start to find ways to give women the key experiences so that she can begin to see that she's got a lot more choices available to her and see the consequences of the choices that she's making. The consequences on the relationships, the consequences on her reputation, and the consequences on the business as well. And think about it in a more broad way before she's just stuck in and has made some damage along the way.